everyone, and welcome to another episode of "'Tis the Dance Season," a DanceVibes podcast, where you can only get episodes if you are in the Instagram group chat. So make sure you DM Dance to the DanceVibes Instagram if you want to do that. And today we are here with Jason Pickett. So Jason, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Absolutely. Yeah. Glad to be here. My name is Jason Pickett. I go by Hey, it's Pickett online. And I am a dance educator and adjudicator. And I do both of those things all over the US as well as internationally. I also own a dance media company called No Starving Artists. We offer mentorship, free resources, a podcast, and a bunch of other stuff under that umbrella. And I also am a full-time faculty member with Reinforced Dance Experience, which is a brand new dance convention. We had our first inaugural season last year, and we're going into our second season, 2026. So yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Yes, just shouting out all the things. Love that. So the first question is, what is because just like knowing like you and like your experience as a dancer, and like a teacher, what is your response to dancers who claim that they, like started late? Because also late means like a lot of different things to different dancers. Like I've heard people tell me that like 10 is too late or like 20 is too late. Like, like there's like a lot of like different thoughts around that. So sort of like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely is all about perspective for sure, and I think it boils down to how bad you want to be good at whatever it is you're doing. For us, we're talking about dance, so if you really want to be good at it and you really want to get good at it, then it's not really going to matter too much what age you start. That just may push back your timeline a little bit. So it's just something to be mindful of. But also, my ethos around dance is that movement is. It's natural and innate, and it's built into all of us. And so regardless of if you started dance when you were 9 years old or 16 years old, you've been moving your body for X amount of years. So it's a question of figuring out how to translate that movement and that understanding of your body into dance. And I think sometimes even starting late, you have more of an advantage when it comes to that because you do understand yourself a little bit more. And for context, I started when I was around like 14, 15. And didn't really start dancing until I was probably like 17, 18.
Yeah, I love that perspective. That's just like, it's just sort of based on sort of like how like far into it you want to go. And like, it doesn't, like age really is just a number in that like context.
100%.
So also kind of starting like adding on more into this sort of like mindset theme, what's one belief you held like early on in your career, maybe like one like limiting belief that you've just like completely changed your mind about?
I think one in relation to me was that I was trying to dance like everybody around me. So I am a fairly tall human. So I was trying to dance like all of the people that were around me who were much shorter than me and much smaller than me. And I thought that that's what I needed to do because they were good. And so I was just kind of mimicking what they were doing, not realizing that by doing that, I was sort of like taking away from the power that I had. And so it took a long time, honestly, for me to realize like that my height and my length and just my size overall was an advantage to me and not a disadvantage. That's definitely like number one, I would say. I think the other like more like applicable one for like a wider range would be that I used to not really be super passionate about college for dancers. And I don't know necessarily that I'm super passionate about it now, but I think that it's a really good choice for a majority of kids. I think, I went to college. I don't necessarily know that I needed to. I didn't go for dance, but I went. But I do think that like for a majority of, dancers and just youth in general, I think college is a great opportunity to meet people, to meet new friends, to network, to learn new skills, and also just kind of like, take a few years away from home if you opt to do that. So that's probably like a more recent one that's kind of shifted for me.
Yeah, I love that, especially because also like about like college for dance, like there's so many options for that too. Right, like you go to like a conservatory like the Space or CLI, You could get like BFA, like UDA with college dance. Like there's also like so many different ways you could go with that, and I think that's
100%
like, talked about a lot.
Yeah, and I think like when it comes to like dance in college, I think that particular space has done a really good job of scaling. Like they stay current with the times. I don't know. I think that there's not a lot of programs in college that you can say that for. And I think that's one that has done a really good job of staying relevant and staying valuable to dancers.
Yeah, definitely. So also kind of like switching gears and talking like more about dance, like dancer mindset, sort of.
Mhm,
So you've talked a lot about how confidence is trainable, especially in dancers. So
mhm.
what's like an actual habit that you think a dancer could do maybe like daily or weekly to help build that confidence?
Yeah, yeah, I firmly believe that. I don't think that confidence is like a born skill set at all. I think anybody has the opportunity to become confident. I think one habit is just the habit of but statements. So when you start to feel negative self-talk come into play, you just immediately hit it with a but statement. Like if you're backstage and you're getting ready for your solo, or you're in class and you're nervous and you start to feel like, okay, I'm not good enough, or these people are really good at this competition, but I'm also really good and I've been working on my solo really hard and I love my music and I love my performance. That act of like countering your negative self-talk, I think sometimes we feel like we're completely out of control in that situation. When negative self-talk comes into play, it's easy to feel like we're completely out of control, but you do have the ability to talk back to those thoughts. And that's a really powerful skill, because after a while, your perspective and lens starts to shift. And now those negative talking points turn into positive talking points. So I think that's absolutely a habit that people can change. And I also think just realizing that confidence is very situational. Confidence doesn't really have anything to do with like my value that I hold for myself. It's much more external. It's how comfortable I am in a given situation. And so if I know that, then I can at least have a little bit more control over my perspective when I'm in an uncomfortable situation.
Yeah, I think that's definitely some great advice, especially for a lot of dancers, especially because I feel like now there's also like a lot of comparison with like social media, like conventions. So I think that's definitely something like really simple, but also very
Yeah,
powerful that someone can do.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, and also you do also talk a lot about how dancers over focus on like tricks, especially
hmm
for dance routines. So, like, where do you think that energy should go instead, if not into like perfecting like a certain trick or this sort of like big, like like big moment and like their solo, duo, trio, group, like those kind of things?
I think musicality, performance, and textures are the top three things. I think if you're going to put your focus into something, and I think if you I view it from this lens, is if you want to safeguard your future as an artist and you want to really set yourself apart, musicality, performance, and textures will take you way farther than individual tricks will. Um, and it's more, those things are more applicable in a wider range of situations as well. So I would say those are the three biggest things.
Yeah, I love that. I think a lot of dancers also definitely need to hear that. Like I remember when I was younger for this solo for my solo, there was this like one trick that I really wanted to get and I just like wasn't getting it. And then finally at like one rehearsal, my court like teacher at the time, she just gave me the very harsh reality of like it's not worth like putting your time into this when you could be like focusing on like all these other parts of your solo that would like add more to
Yeah,
it.
the time conversation is a big one, because for me that's how it always was. Is like I it's not worth the time if tricks are not natural to you. If it's because sometimes people just they're drawn to certain things and it makes sense to them in their body and their physical composition. Like when we're talking about tricks, like there's a physical component to it for sure. And you could spend a ton of time trying to get tricks when it's not something that is like a great skill of yours, and it's really kind of just like maybe not time wasted, but it's not efficient at all. Whereas you could work on something else and get much more out of it, because for a lot of us, our dancing is not super long term. Some of us are going to stop dancing after studio, some of us are going to stop dancing after college, some of us are going to stop dancing just because our bodies give out. So there is a little bit of a time crunch when it comes to getting to a point where you feel really comfortable. And so, optimizing that time and being efficient with your training is really important.
Yeah, definitely. Especially because also there's like, like injuries happen, like life happens. So it's also very important
Yeah,
to just like use your time wisely in that sense.
100%.
Okay, so kind of again switching gears and talking more about just like sort of like your career and like performance and like industry realities, especially for dance. So
hmm
you've performed at so many places like around the world. You've worked with many major brands, especially with like social media now and like Instagram. Like, what's like the honest reality of some of those jobs that you think like social media doesn't really like show dancers, right? Because also there's so many dancers who like want to be like a backup dancer or like just like go like all these different like ways in the industry, but they don't like really know like what they're signing up for when they do that.
Yeah. I think a big misconception is that everybody's just going to like open auditions and booking jobs that way. And that is an option. Like there are open auditions that people go to and they book jobs, especially if we're talking about like Broadway shows, particularly. There's certain guidelines and regulations because of the union. So, there are open auditions that people go to. That's generally how people get jobs. If we look more to like the commercial industry, which is where my experience lies more, things like backup dancing, music videos, live performances, a lot of those jobs are what are called direct bookings, meaning the choreographer or the producer is reaching out directly to dancers and booking them for those jobs. So, for example, pretty much every single job that I've ever done was directly through my network. It was directly through people saying, "Hey, could you do this job? Are you available?" And even to the extent that, like, a story that I always tell people is I was once upon a time with a really small like talent agency that was based here in Utah. And I never really did anything with them. I just like somebody talked me into it and I was like, okay, cool. But what was funny about the situation is I had booked a job and everything, the whole cast was booked. We had flights, we had hotels, everything was settled. The trip, like the job was happening. It was done and done. And like 2 weeks before we were supposed to go on the job, this agent that I was with, this talent management company, sent out an email to all their talent and they were like, "Hey, we're auditioning for this job. It's a great opportunity, like, yada, yada, yada." And in my head, I'm like, there's no spots available on this job. Like, you guys are sending out an audition for a job to make it look like you're giving people opportunities, but there's no opportunity here. Everybody's already booked. And that is kind of a harsh reality, is that sometimes things like that happen where they have to hold an audition in order to uphold a certain standard, when in reality, everybody's already booked. So is that annoying? Is that frustrating? Is that unrealistic? Sure. The actionable is like your network is really important. The people that you work with, the people that the people that you're friends with, for dancers listening to this, all the kids that are around you at convention that you're interacting with and rubbing shoulders with, those are the future choreographers, booking agents, talent reps. Those are those people. You're dancing with them in the room right now. So get to know them, because you don't know who's going to be across from the table or who's going to be at the end of the phone call that you make that might pick up and be like, "Oh, I remember you from Nuvo 2025, and we had a great time." Like, that stuff matters a lot. So I think that's a big, big thing that people don't really understand. And even friends of mine that are really active in LA right now, they're auditioning, but majority of the jobs they're getting are through people that they know and through choreographers that they've worked with in the past. They've assisted them, they've taken their class, etc.
Yeah, I love that. I think that definitely is like a big misconception. People think that like, oh, if I just go to like this open casting call, or if I just do this audition, but no, if you only if you maybe like know this person, or you like remember this guy, like, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So also for dancers who are dreaming of going pro in that direction, like commercial or like Broadway, things like that, like what are some of like the biggest mistakes that you maybe see those dancers make that they can like avoid?
I think a good example is like, I'll come across dancers sometimes that are like, "I want to go the Broadway route. I want to be in a Broadway show." And, my follow-up question is always like, "Okay, do you sing?" And they're like, "No, I've never sang." That's legwork. That's part of like, you gotta do the work for what it is that you want to do. If you want to be on Broadway, then you need to be in singing lessons along with your dancing lessons. You should probably be taking acting classes as well. So I think it's like the biggest mistake that I see, to just like make it specific, is not targeting your training towards what you want to do. I think I see a lot of like broad stroke training happening, and that works for some dancers, but for the majority of dancers, you need to be specific with your training, depending on what it is that you want to do. Because again, if you want to go like be on like, Ohio State's dance team, that's a very specific set of skills that you need to have. And if you don't have those skills, you're not even going to be considered. So I think targeting your training a little bit more is really, really important for a lot of dancers.
Yeah, definitely. Especially because also just like requirements are changing sort of, and like creative cross training is like a big thing. Like if you want to like, for example, right, like there's like a lot of dancers who want to like, quote unquote, like be the artist, like in like a girl group or like, or like a pop group, those kind of things. Like, and like if you don't know how to sing, or you don't know how to maybe like dance in heels or like those kind of things, like that's obviously a big thing.
100%, and take opportunities too. If those things come across, your way, and you've never done it before, or you're uncomfortable with it, take those opportunities, because you never know when you're going to stumble across a skill that you're really good at. and that could help you define your direction a little bit more.
Yeah, exactly. And also, what's like, how do you think that the industry, especially for dance, has changed in like the past couple of years, right? Because especially with like commercial alone, right? Like it's changed so much from like like before the standard was like I want to dance with Chris Brown, and now the standard's like I want to go on tour with like Beyonce or like like all these other people.
Yeah, I think social media is a big thing that's shifted in the past. I mean, it's really been like 10-ish years, but I think it's getting more and more. Every year, it gets more and more intense in terms of like your social media does make a pretty big difference in your options that are available to you. I've heard of auditions where you can't even audition unless you have a set amount of followers. So those things do exist, and those things are happening. I mean, even on the Broadway spectrum, like all of these influencers that are going to Broadway and making that bridge happen. It's becoming more and more of a thing, and I think it really does open up a lot of opportunity for dancers. So I think social media is probably a big one, and I think also just like like you mentioned, things shift over time. There was a time when you wanted to be like in a music video, or you wanted to go on tour. Like that was the pinnacle of dance, and that shifted a lot recently, where now a lot of dancers want to be convention teachers, or they want to be convention assistants, depending on your age. And I think that that's a big shift that we've seen recently. And I think that it opens up like a whole new world and a whole different way of training and sort of approaching your dance when that's kind of your end goal.
Yeah, definitely. And also kind of adding on to that, instead of like, I guess like end goals or like ultimate like career goals for dance, what do you think is an underrated career path for dance that you think like dancers or like teens should like pay more attention to?
That's a really good question. I think, wow. I mean, I've always thought there wasn't enough dancers going more of like the representation route. I think that there is a big like pocket of space that's available for dancers that maybe they don't necessarily want to be a professional dancer, but they want to work with professional dancers and get them booked. I think that like there is definitely we have the big agencies, but there's pros and cons to big agencies. I think there's a space that will develop in the next like 5 to 10 years where we see dancers creating very niche agencies for dance teachers and dancers in order to get them booked on jobs. And I think there's potentially a lot of money to be made there. I think that's probably one that I would say for sure. And I think like just more of what like you're doing with this dancerpreneur pathway. I think that that's something very underrated that a lot of dancers aren't really looking towards, is that there is a lot of opportunity for dance businesses to be created that aren't the standard, studio or things like that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also for any other like dancers listening to this who maybe like do want to start their own thing, like everything you just said, like niche sort of like talent agencies for dancers, like that's already like something someone can start. And especially also I feel like for dancewear or just like any like dance brand, like there are like sort of like the big ones, like Tiger Friday, Five, or like for mentorship programs, there's like what you're doing with NSA, like Menina Fortunato, Blake McGrath, but like that's only like the touch of it. Like you can like obviously go like so much more in depth into that.
Yeah. I think even, I mean, this is another thing that I've thought about. And I'm not going to do it. So if somebody else wants to take initiative, is like a monthly collaborative PR box for dance influencers. You reach out to a bunch of the big dance brands, Five and all of these different companies, even adjacent companies like supplements or training tools. And, you just say, hey, I've got a list of 20 dance influencers that have X amount of followers. Would you be willing to pitch in for like a monthly subscription box that gets sent out? There's a lot of like opportunity for sure. As the space grows, more opportunities open up underneath that. And that's really where you want to be looking.
Yeah, definitely. And again, kind of, again, just like going back into sort of just like mindset and just like general dance things, like when like a dancer feels that they're like plateauing, you know, or maybe like, oh, like my solo's not as strong this season, or like I don't like feel like I did last season. Like what do you think like is like the big thing that you want them to maybe like look into or reflect on before they sort of like get like more stressed out about that?
Yeah, I think this is where like journaling and like keeping track of your progress is really important, because if you've been keeping track of your progress, you can go back and look and see like, oh wow, like, you know, in the short term, I maybe have plateaued a little bit, but you know, if I think about truly from 2 years ago, if I go back and watch videos of myself, the growth is crazy. So I think that's why like documenting your progress is really, really important. I also think taking class, like if you're really feeling like you're plateauing, like go try to find an open class to take, or get some friends together and like choreograph something and teach it to them, or vice versa. That like, you know, that's how a lot of us started, is just taking dance classes. So going back to that, where it's low stress, where you're not focused on cleaning a routine or whatever, can really help to like reignite that spark and that passion. And then I think a last little like really actionable thing is specific to solos. If you're having trouble with your solo, because it gets to a point where you've just ran your solo so many times, it's just not fun anymore. Try doing it to different music. You know, don't actually change it for competition, but you know, it's a fun activity to do during practice. Is like pick a different song and like, you know, run a 30-minute rehearsal, just doing your solo choreography to that song. And you know, sometimes even that's enough to just like mix it up and give you a different perspective on the routine.
I love that. I think that's definitely some good advice, especially as, you know, like January is sort of like when like competitions really like pick up. And this is sort of when like dancers hit that like mid-season slump of like, I've been like doing this like one routine, or like been doing like the same rehearsal schedule for like so many months, and like, you know, just kind of like that burnout or just like boredom point. So I think that's definitely some good advice.
Absolutely.
Okay, and then before we sort of get to like the closing of this, where we talk about like just like basic like takeaways, things like that. This is just a question for, I think, something that like a lot of like teen dancers especially need to hear. What do you think are some big convention misconceptions? Because especially because you're a faculty at like Reinforce, and you know, like dancers have like so much like anxiety around dance conventions, and you know, like getting called out, comparison. Like, what do you think is a big misconception that like they should know before like, you know, like January comes and like conventions pick up?
I think a big misconception is just that like authenticity really does like rule, like all the way down to like what you're wearing. Like I think a lot of dancers get frustrated at convention because they're not getting what they want out of it. But I think if you really were to look at it objectively, like you're showing up in the same outfit as everybody else, you're showing up, you know, with the same, you know, the energy, you're trying to match the people around you. And that's just a recipe for you blending in. It's doing the exact opposite of what you're trying to do. I think I'm a big encourager of dancers just embracing who they are and embracing what you bring to the table and your skills. I think a common, like a bunch of like quick fire things that I think are really helpful tips. When it comes to improv, don't do things you can't do. I know this sounds like a crazy tip, but we see it all the time where dancers do things that they just are not good skills for them. And it shows you in a very not great light. I think another thing is performance is really, really important. Energy is really, really important. Confidence is really, really important. Assuming you have the choreography. That's something that I don't hear people talk about very often, is they're like, oh, you know, your performance is big, or whatever, or they talk about these other things, and they neglect the fact that you do have to have the choreography. You can't not have the choreography and then just magically get what you want. So your process in class needs to be really, really fine-tuned. I think also, if you're a dancer that goes to conventions frequently, you need to really take a look at like what your process is in class and ask yourself if you're wasting any time. Because I do see a lot of dancers waste time in class and not use their class time effectively. And that's the main reason why they're not able to pick up the choreography fast enough. And then I think it's being aware. I think, you know, as we kind of work up the ladder here, if we're at the top of the pyramid and you're someone that you go to conventions, you're really hungry, you really, really want it, you need to be paying attention to what everybody around you is doing, especially in an audition, the audition portion. You know, when you're watching groups, what are people doing? What are the choices they're making? And more importantly, what are the choices they're not making? Because those are the choices that you want to make. If there's a round of improv in the audition and you're seeing everybody do the same tricks and everybody's doing the same turns and everybody's doing this or that, do not do those things. Come out and show us something different. That's what we want to see. We want to see you make choices, and we want to see you be confident in those choices. I think the last thing that I would say, because I realized that this was a big misconception and I realized that I knew the answer, I just never thought about it. A lot of people get frustrated that scholarships are given to, the same people, or they're given to people who, I hear this a lot, like, oh, they weren't even in class, or they weren't even, they weren't in all the classes or whatever. It's understanding that sometimes we have to get our scholarship information into the director before the weekend is finished. So sometimes I have to get my scholarships for the senior room in before I even have the seniors. So that means that I have to jump into someone else's class and watch the seniors in that class and select my scholarship winners from that class. So that answers two things. One, it answers the question of how does that happen? That's usually how it happens. It's not that we're intentionally giving it to people that weren't in our class. It's that we might have given it before we even had them. But number two, more importantly, it opens up this idea that you are being watched the entire weekend. You never know when a faculty member is going to be in a room and see you and make a note of your number. You don't know when that's going to happen. So you got to be on the entire weekend, and you got to be locked in the entire weekend, because again, at any moment in time, in the hallway, it's happened to me in the hallway where I missed someone in class and I passed them in the hallway and I'm like, ooh, I actually really like that person, and I jot down their number. So you never know when somebody's watching you.
Yeah, I love that. I think that addresses like a lot of things that dancers are stressed about, or like they feel sort of like resentment towards. Because also, especially with like getting scholarships out, like I've literally seen like convention faculty like running around at conventions to printers just trying to get like scholarships printed out, and even that itself is a big thing.
Yeah, 100%.
So yeah, I think this whole interview definitely covered a lot of things that dancers were like curious about, or things that they're struggling with, especially this season. So like out of like everything we've talked about, because we've covered a lot from like mindset to like industry and like conventions, like what do you think is like one thing at least that you would like want a dancer listening to this to like get out of this?
I think we didn't even touch on this too much, but I think like just make sure you're clear on what it is that you want to do. I think that that's really, really, really important. And I think that looks like looking at the short term and looking at the long term. What do you really want to accomplish in the short term? And what do you really want to accomplish in the long term? And make sure that that's in your line of sight constantly. So, I'm a big advocate for journaling, a big advocate for goal setting. Create goals that are actionable, create goals that are reasonable. Don't create goals that are scholarships or placement at competition. Create goals that you can actually accomplish and that are in your control. That's the big thing that is an issue with a scholarship, is that's not entirely in my control. So that's a bad goal, because there's a big chance I'm going to fail. The goal has to be something that I can take action towards and, achieve in order for me to like create momentum. And that's really what we're trying to do with goals, is create momentum. We want to strike off goals, so that way we see that and we go, okay, cool, like I'm progressing.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's also something that dancers can also like easily like implement, just like take out like your journal or like your plan, or just like write down your goals, or like use the DanceVibes app and like plan out your goals, like things like that.
Yep, 100%.
Okay, and now that we're sort of ending off this interview, where can people find you? Your Instagram, website, socials, those kind of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, it's Pickett is where you can find me on social media. And then No Starving Artist is my brand. Website is nsadance.com. And you're welcome to DM me, email me, whatever. I'm more than happy to answer any questions you have, or give you any advice on anything.
Awesome.